as somebody who spent a majority of time living in the Northeast, being from Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and now living here full-time as a realtor in Charleston, South Carolina, these are some of the things that I've learned and that I want to share with you guys if you are relocating here, specifically from the Northeast. The houses and the neighborhoods down here are definitely different. First off, there are no basements here, right? The soil is very sandy and clay in some areas and wet. So the only way to actually get a basement in your house is to elevate that property, which can be a little more expensive than traditional means, but it's still not necessarily going to really be closed in. There are some areas where you can enclose it, but there are no basements. So there's a serious lack of storage here in the Charleston area. And what many people do is they will turn their garages into their basement. So, you might find a house in a certain subdivision and you notice everyone's parking in the driveway or on the road. Why is no one using their garage? It's because all of their stuff is sitting in that garage because we don't have any basements here. And the way that the houses were built too, many of the older homes like the 60s and 70s, and there are homes that are like this in the north, but a lot of the homes that are built were built for, almost like hurricane standards. So there's a lot of small ranch homes that are all brick. So for someone that likes an older house, you're basically going to be looking at, brick homes. There's not a lot of colonials, for example, that style up in New England that is very common. They're not really built like that down here. And because you don't have a basement, we have other things like crawl spaces. And in the crawl space, I'm going to be honest with you, there is going to be some type of mold or fungus. Something is going to be down there. The amount of times I've heard people say, well, if there's any sign of mold, I'm out of there. That would eliminate almost every house in Charleston. And this is the reason why, okay? Because mold and fungi is either active or non-active. And before you buy a house, you're gonna have a CL 100 inspection done, which essentially looks for mold and termite damage in the crawl space of the home. They do a little bit of exterior stuff. They'll look for wood rot and things like that around door jambs. But the real purpose of the CL 100 is to go look for mold and termite damage underneath the house. So you will have that done. And what's going to happen is it's going to come back with either evidence of non-active or active mold, fungus, that type of thing. And the difference between active and non-active fungus is the wood moisture concentration. So there is a set number to that. For example, you'll see your inspection comes back and the wood is at 11% moisture and there's old evidence of fungus down there, or there's non-active fungus down there. There is nothing that the seller is obligated to have to fix. There's nothing that would stop you from getting a loan on that house. And honestly, there's nothing to be concerned about in that house. And I like to think of it as like, if you had an old roof leak and that roof leak stained the wood and the stain is still there, but the wood is now dry, well, there's nothing wrong with that piece of wood, right? For the purpose of what we're looking at, there is no active leak and that wood is just discolored due to a previous stain. So if the report comes back as a house having non-active fungus, it means that, the fungus isn't active. The wood moisture content is not high enough in that house to produce an active mold or fungus growth. So the reality is, wherever you look in Charleston, there's probably going to be some type of non-active mold or fungus in your house, and it's really not a concern unless the wood moisture content is high, giving that mold and fungus the ability to actually grow. And in regards to crawl spaces, they can sound scary to people from the north. I get it. You're going to have, maybe some snakes and bugs and stuff that get down in there. And it is the reality. We are in the south. But the reality is, they're very normal. It is to promote airflow through the house, to not have mold and fungus, that type of thing, to elevate that house off the ground. So if there was any groundwater or anything, it wouldn't go into your house. But there are different things you can do to your crawl space. A lot of people have a vapor barrier down, which is basically just a thin, poly material that is on the ground to kind of keep the humidity and the moisture content low in the crawl space. You can encapsulate the crawl space with dehumidifiers. That costs, probably anywhere from, $5,000 to $10,000. about $10,000 is going to be pretty standard on a house. It's about 1,600, 1,700 square feet. Could be a little bit more, but that's going to basically turn your crawl space into an area where you could, store material down there. It's going to be dehumidified. The temperature is going to be regulated. It's going to be really nice crawl space. But there are definitely things you can do to your crawl space if you're very concerned about it. And there are a lot of crawl spaces here. So if that's something you absolutely do not want, I've dealt with people that do not want anything to do with a crawl space. That's fine. There are homes out there. There's just not as many older homes. If you want an older home that's going to be on a slab, almost every house, basically prior to like 1980 or 1990, it's going to be on a crawl space. So down here in Charleston, it's obviously very warm most of the time. And right now it's not. I mean, it is, 64 degrees, December 20 something, right? So this is, kind of how the winter months are here. It does get cooler for sure, but we'll talk about that in a second. My windshield wipers are going off here. I want to talk about the AC really quickly, because the air conditioning in a home is very important to look at if you're looking to buy here for a few different reasons. One, you are going to use your AC a lot down here. Depending on how you live, you're probably going to want to be very comfortable. And if it is, always humid and 90 plus degrees or 85 plus degrees and humid for months at a time, you're going to be running your AC a lot. So the age of that AC is very important. But not only that, the SEER rating is important on the unit. And also the ductwork in the house is extremely important, because up north, a lot of the ductwork that we have up north is like a metal. It's a metal ductwork product. The reason they use metal up there is because you're using a lot more heat. So you're transferring a lot of heat and air, and the metal helps to send it through the house basically. But it's also, you don't have to, when you're using air conditioning, it can expand or whatever it is. I'm not an HVAC guy. I don't know the exact reason. All I know is that because heat is more predominantly used up north, you're using rigid metal. That stuff can last for 40, 50, 60 years. It could last a very long time. Not much is going to affect that. But down in the south, because you're using a lot more very cool air, you're getting the air conditioning, you're using like a flexible ductwork, and it is fragile. It can rip. If there is ever a roof leak and some water accumulates in there or around it, it can start to deteriorate that material. And it's important when you go look at a house. You might look at a house from the 1980s, nice house, new HVAC. The seller says they replaced the HVAC and the air handler and everything, and everything's great. The problem is they didn't touch the ductwork from 1980, and it's 40 years old. It's 50 years old. That ductwork might be bad. And if they're selling a house that they never lived in, maybe it was their mother's house or their father's house, and then whatever, they didn't really pay too much attention to it, you might have to replace that ductwork. And that ductwork could cost as much as the unit itself. Running ductwork all throughout a new house, especially when it's flexible, if it's broken, it's run down through walls in areas. You'd have to cut through walls. It's a whole thing. So don't just look at the age of your HVAC system. Also look at the age of your ductwork system. I also have a lot of people talk to me about flooding, and they say, I don't want to be near the water. I don't want to be in a flood zone. Well, the reality is, you could be living in Somerville or Monk's Corner, 20, 30 miles from the coast, and you're still in a flood zone. This area is called the Low Country for a reason. There's not a lot of elevation changes here, and because of that, a lot of the land is low and in flood zones. Now, there are different levels to the flood zone. There's an X flood zone, which means you don't have to have insurance. It's not required. Nationally, by the bank, you don't have to have it. You get a loan, you don't have to have insurance. You can buy insurance if you'd like. You don't have to have it. But there are AE flood zones. That's typically going to change depending on where you're at. Closer to a river or the water, obviously, is going to be definitely in a specific flood zone. But I would not look at flood zones as a very scary thing, but instead look at areas that have lower lying streets where your access to your house could be flooded out. And this could happen anywhere. There's a lot of areas downtown this happens in. We have a light rain and it gets flooded and it screws everything up. And your house itself is not in a flood zone, but the street you're driving to, James Island or Mount Pleasant, is low and those access roads flood and it's difficult to get into your house. So just because your house is not in a flood zone doesn't mean it's going to be a piece of cake to get there if we have 6 hours of hard rain, because it might not be, and you might have to figure out a different way to get home, or not go home for a while and wait for the water to go down. Or buy a bigger car, an SUV or a truck. A lot of people drive them here. A lot of people they go off-roading or hunting or different things like that. But it's also very good to have in terms of heavy rains. I'm driving a 2017 Honda Accord Sport 6-speed manual, and it is not good in the rain. One of the things that I love about this car is that it's completely paid off and it's fun to drive. The other thing that I really don't like about the car is that if it ever floods in certain areas and I have to drive, it makes commuting a nightmare. The weather down here definitely, people talk about this a lot, okay? The winters down here are definitely easier. It's December right now. Now, we had a cold snap that came through and it affected everywhere on the East Coast. And, we had to cover some of our plants outside. It was 30-something degrees. It was cold. It was under freezing, I think, for one or two of those nights. The reality is, right now, as I said before, it's 64 degrees in December. This is warm for December. I'm not going to say this is average. Is it common to see this happen in the winter where it's 65 or 75? Absolutely. That can absolutely happen. But it's also not as common as it just being around like 45 to 55. That's going to be more of your standard temperatures throughout the winter. So it's cool, but it's like mild at the same time. It's definitely not common for it to be 80 in January, just as it's not really common for it to be 25 in January. Can it happen? Yes. Does it happen often? No. But if you're looking for, weather like Florida, year-round, where you're going to retire somewhere, you're going to relocate, you really want it to be warm throughout the winter, Charleston's definitely a more mild climate, so you're not going to have that type of weather if you're looking for that type of weather. Outdoor time does shift, to mornings and evenings. It can when the later on in the year, but we get more light down here than you will up north in the wintertime, for sure. It's one thing my parents still talk about. They live in Massachusetts, but they the sun goes down very early up there. We have about 45 minutes of extra daylight down here in the south in the wintertime, which is nice. Plus, we never have like sleeting, we don't have sleet, and that is one thing that I don't miss about the North. And I'll talk about a few things that I do miss about the North, but definitely that is something I don't miss. I don't miss waking up or getting out of work and it's 37 degrees and it should be snowing, but instead I have freezing rain hitting my face, right? I'd rather it be 30 so it could snow versus it be 38 and it be sleeting all over the place. The homes down here are priced definitely cheaper than up north. They are. There are certain areas around here where you can get an inexpensive house compared to what the home prices are up north. You get more for your money. Yes, that is true. But it's only true now at this point in certain areas. If you buy in some of the hot spots being Mount Pleasant, Daniel Island, the islands, Sullivan's Island, those island places are definitely hot. But now even James Island, some areas of West Ashley, but for the most part, you're looking at those coastal communities, Daniel Island, Mount P, James Island, and then close to the water. It is becoming very expensive to find, or it's becoming very challenging to find a less expensive house. So one thing that starts to happen in the conversations I'm having with people in some aspect is if they're coming down to almost retire, they're trading their $1 million house to buy another $1 million house. And they're like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And Massachusetts is very expensive too. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to move there, but you're not getting that big, great deal that you always got 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 6 years ago. The home prices in the areas have gone up because people from the Northeast are moving down here. The areas that do feel less expensive, honestly, in a weird way, some of the areas along the beaches, like Folly Beach, you can get a property, Folly Beach, and spend $3 million and actually be on the ocean front. You can do that. You're not going to be able to find that on Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard or Long Island. You're not going to have that. You can down here. So some of those ultra luxury homes, they're they are more affordable. Some of the family-friendly homes are just becoming not as affordable because a lot of those people have moved down here to reap the benefit of taking their work from home salary and just buying a house that more fits their needs, and say spending $800,000 and getting a great house versus spending $650,000 or $800,000 in Massachusetts and getting a very small house or a townhouse that just doesn't work for them anymore. And that does go into the next point of jobs and things like that down here. The best bet for you if you're relocating here without a job is to try and get a job beforehand and just do that work from home job, make that Northeast salary, and then relocate here. Depending on what you're looking to do, there are jobs available. You know, that healthcare is a big one down here. There's manufacturing here. There is a little bit of a tech community here in Charleston, so if you're in tech, there are jobs there for it. But like everywhere else in the country, the job market can be tough. It can be very competitive. A lot of people have moved here looking to relocate and are looking for work and jobs. So a lot of people that I've spoken with recently and have helped them buy here in Charleston, they either already live here and have a job here, or they're relocating here with a work from home job. And that honestly is probably going to be the easiest way for you to live a great life down here, to find a great house, to have that work from home job. But if you're in nursing, you work, you want to get into Boeing and things like that, you can. But Boeing and nursing, like MUSC downtown, the Medical University of South Carolina, it's really competitive. And a lot of people have talked to me about how competitive it is to go to work at these hospitals. And also at Boeing, man, it is ultra competitive to try and get into Boeing. So there are jobs here, but man, just try and take that work from home job in the Northeast and relocate here. You'll live a much better life. So where I grew up in Massachusetts, so I grew up in Massachusetts. Then we moved to New Hampshire, and then my parents relocated back to Massachusetts. I went to school in New Hampshire, college in New Hampshire, and I lived in Concord and Portsmouth and things like that. But in my childhood, I lived in 3 different homes. Each house had a minimum of 1 acre, okay? And the way that the communities and the subdivisions are developed up north, especially, you're probably going to have new construction now where it's kind of clear cut or whatever, and they're just building homes or whatever they're doing. But a lot of those older communities from even the 90s, the 2000s, subdivisions that were built, a lot of the developers and builders, because the land was a little bit more cheap, right? They gave you more land. So, the home where I grew up had 3 acres. The home in Bedford had 3 acres. And then the home in Massachusetts, I think it almost had an acre. It was like 0.75 or 0.8. It was close to an acre, but we had space. There was no one behind me. There was no one across the street. There was, but they were so far away because we're offset, and it's like a different feeling of subdivisions. I'll kind of show you as we kind of go along on the screen, like what those subdivisions look like compared to what a standard subdivision might look like down here in Charleston. And the standard subdivision and house, especially in areas like, for example, like James Island, you're going to have a lot of ranch homes. A lot of ranch homes that are built on 0.18 acres, and everyone's kind of stacked up in a line right, on top of each other. Unless you move into a subdivision like a Dunes West or a Park West, where you're paying the extra money for that land, you don't really get that feeling of the subdivisions and the lifestyle that you had back home. And I think one of the reasons is, until very recently, Charleston was it was a tourist city, but it wasn't like I'm going to uproot my whole family and relocate to Charleston. That changed during COVID. Through the years, has it happened? Yes, it has. But was it like it was at demand in 2019 and 2020 and 2021? Absolutely not. So what the city leaders were looking to do is they were figuring out, okay, well, we need to develop a lot more land for these people moving in. And what are we going to do? We're just going to clear cut everything and build everything on top of each other. Now, also, one of the reasons why you don't have as much land as we do in Massachusetts and New Hampshire is the land around the city and the areas, only so much can be developed due to maybe low-lying areas or marshes, or wet areas that can't be developed. So when they found a subdivision, they really had to cram everyone in there. And in Massachusetts too, up in the north, just keep saying the Northeast, you'll have elevation changes. So it's not as easy to build, a house on top of each other because you've got hills and, all this fun stuff, right? We don't have hills here. So you've got certain pockets of development that builders in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and so on and so forth would say, okay, this pocket is in an area that is low, but we're going to bring in dirt from this area to kind of fill this up and level it and just slam everyone in one spot. That's how the subdivisions were built around here. And when you move here to Charleston from up north, you're definitely going to feel that it just wasn't developed like it was back home. And there are the reasons for it that I just mentioned. And also with growing up in the Northeast, we didn't have any HOAs. I've never lived in an HOA in my life until I moved to Charleston. And HOAs are very common here because the way that the communities were built, like I said, looking at land and finding out where suitable land is and bringing in dirt and making this area the buildable lots and this area the drainage areas, the developers built them and created HOAs. So they created HOAs for people because one, you're going to be like right on top of each other. So they want their neighbors to kind of keep their house looking good and that type of thing. And then two, there's just different regulations. Hey, you have to maintain flood insurance. You have to, whatever you're going to do. So they created these HOAs for these communities. And there's a ton of them down here. So a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be in an HOA. Fantastic. There are many homes that don't have an HOA, but a lot of those homes are going to be older homes that were in subdivisions that were built in the 60s and 70s. They were just built, no HOA, it is what it is, have fun. A lot of the newer style homes, open floor plans, whatever people want, they're going to be in an HOA. Now there's definitely one-off homes, a builder buys a lot, they put a house on it, they put a spec home on it, whatever it is, no HOA, fantastic, you can find those. But a lot of the homes are in the HOA. But when I was looking here to move in Charleston, I was like, man, the last thing I want to do is be in an HOA. I don't want to be in an HOA. And I ended up actually moving into an HOA. One of the reasons was going back to having no storage in the house, no garage, no basements. Everyone stores their things either in their garage, and if it doesn't fit, guess where it goes? It goes in the front lawn. There's not a lot of storage here. So people have old cars out front. They've got their boat out front. Maybe they've got a work trailer just in their front lawn. And the reality is, if you're not used to that, you better get used to it quickly if you don't want to live in a non-HOA. Can you find non-HOA homes that are beautiful? Yes. Is it a common thing to really find? Depending on your budget. If you're budget restricted, not really. You're gonna have to drive through some weird stuff to get to your beautiful house. And that's just kind of the way that the way Charleston is down here. And in regards to HOAs, different upkeep, neighborhood expectations, they're gonna vary. Okay, so not every HOA is very strict, first off. Not every HOA is $500 a month. Mine's $245 a month. Some HOAs are a lot less, depending on the size of the subdivision. But some HOAs are very strict. They will come around and they'll do monthly site walks. They'll tell you to pressure wash your house. They'll tell you what color you can't paint your front door, what car you can't keep in your driveway, etc. Some people don't like that. I get it. They don't want somebody telling them what they can or can't do. But the things that I saw when I was buying, especially areas in non-HOAs, is that the people who live here and have worked here and grew up here for a long time, Charleston was a very affordable place to live because the job market is not as strong as it is up north. And that means median income levels, salaries are not as high as they are up north. And people down here, now that there's different inflation and home prices and things like that, things are getting more expensive, their salaries aren't going up. They may be just a blue-collar worker who's working at a company and they make, $68,000 a year, or $75,000 a year as a upper-level individual in the company or whatever it is, right? But that extra money doesn't go into upkeep of the house. It might go into their car so they can get to and from work, but there's people here that do struggle financially because their salaries aren't going up the way that it does in other areas. And when I was looking at homes, I would drive by homes that had missing shutters and the siding was missing, And there was a house I looked at. It was in a non-HOA, and it was in a good little neighborhood, all old ranch homes. But there was a guy on the road who had, his roof was obviously not functioning properly because he had a blue tarp over half of his roof. And the reality is, those individuals just don't make enough money to sit there and say, well, I'm going to take out another loan, or I'm going to take $20,000 and redo my roof. And there's nothing that, you can really do to change that. Unfortunately, the salaries are the way they are here. It goes back to the job market thing a little bit. That's why I recommend taking a work from home job and then moving here. But I feel bad for a lot of the locals here for, some reason, for different reasons. A lot of people from the Northeast are driving home prices up. They're trapped in their home. If they sell it, they can't spend $650 to live in the same, or upgrade their house because of their salary. And then the actual work and upkeep that goes into their house and their yard and landscaping and things like that, it doesn't take priority. So if you do move into those areas, non-HOA areas, it's something you'll see. I've toured $1 million homes. This couple that was living out of the area, so I was doing virtual tours for them. Their house was on the water, and the house we were looking at on the water, I think it was like 2.8 million. It was something like that, just under 3, above 2.5. Beautiful house. When you drove down the end of the road, their driveway, it was a long driveway. At the end of the road, or driveway, I keep saying road, at the end of their driveway, there was a mobile home on the other side of it. And that mobile home was very run down. It was in rough shape, and they had a handful, I'm talking 7, 8, just old cars and just junk sitting in their front lawn. And I don't know what they're doing with these cars. I don't know if they're fixing them or whatever. They might have been. But the reality is, those are things that you're going to see if you decide to move here. There's just no real way around it. And I just want to give my final advice to those who are moving down here from the north, okay? So, number one, you need to, if you're visiting here, I would, come down and I would drive different neighborhoods that you plan to live in at different times. You're going to want to see, is this neighborhood walkable? Is it family friendly? Is it what we're looking for? Is it not what we're looking for? Is the traffic loud? What is happening at night? Is it very quiet or is it loud? There are certain subdivisions that are going to be more quiet than others. There's certain subdivisions that are main cut-throughs to other subdivisions and certain roads. So you're going to have to do that, spend time. And also, I would, if you are working here or taking a job here and you're going to be driving to work, I would drive to that subdivision or an area, go to James Island and drive to town, go to Somerville and drive to Charleston at 7 in the morning. See what that commute is actually like, because certain areas are going to be a lot easier to commute than others. Your best bet, if you're working in North Charleston, try to live in like West Ashley or James Island, because when you go up, or Mount Pleasant, because when you go up north, traffic is a lot easier than it is going from like Somerville or Ladson down south. You're going to fight all those people trying to get down here. I would also look past photos. A lot of photos that you're going to see online might show the house in a beautiful light, right? You need to look at some of the things that you can't see. How old is the ductwork? Is the house in a flood zone, and what does that mean? Do I not care about this flood zone? Do I see that the house is not in a flood zone, but the street is actually so low in these certain spots that it's going to flood if I'm trying to go home? Look past the photos. The house might look perfect, but the area could be loud. The area could be in a non-HOA where the other people are living with their, cars in the front lawn. Got to look past it, get with an agent like myself or whoever, or do it your own. Search your own if you want, and then find out if it's going to work for you or not. I would also ask uncomfortable questions early. If you can walk areas and talk to neighbors, please do that. Go talk to neighbors. I love talking to neighbors when I'm doing a walkthrough with a buyer. We might ask them a question like, what's the neighborhood like? How long does it take you to get to the grocery store? How is it at night, et cetera, et cetera. How's the HOA? Who's the president? What's in your HOA reserves? How are the budget? Those types of questions, neighbors are going to answer that very truthfully. So I would definitely ask that. And then finally, I would buy based on how you live, not how you vacation. So if you're okay living in a small house when you go on vacation with your family or something like that, it's close to the beach, that's fantastic. But this is it could be your forever home. Buy based how you're going to live and not how you vacation. So by taking that information, I hope this video has been helpful to you. And if you have any questions, give me a call or send me a text, something like that. And I'm happy to help you out if I can answer any other questions about what it's like to truly relocate from the Northeast and now live here full-time in Charleston, South Carolina.